backpack about this small and stays in hostels because he thinks it helps him stay in touch with people and get perspectives on like, okay, like I know how to market to rich people, but what about youth, you know, who have very little money to spend, need to get around the city. I'm competing for their bus fare right now. So how can I get a level of service in place that can take some of their bus fare and get them even happier because they can ride around in a car now, right? And so it's fascinating. But I'm like I said, I'm looking for those people who help me understand that their success is inevitable. I'm looking for those people who I've seen have come from circumstances that show that they will not take a day or two setback as like real, right? That when this thing fails the first time, they know they can out back out of it again. That they will not feel beat down and get totally depressed about it. That they have resilience, you know? They know what ups and downs are really like. I'm looking for these people that have shown me they can attract other people, that they can bring people and get them fired up to work with them. I'm looking for people who can tell a story, because you got to be able to tell a story to your users. You got to be able to tell a story to advertisers or to people who are going to pay you. You got to be able to tell a story to investors, to employees, to recruits, to people who are going to buy you or another company that you're going to buy. You have to be an effective storyteller. And if you can't tell an effective story when we sit down, then you've just shown, like, I think there's a low likelihood that you're going to succeed. And so all of these things, you know, even like you name the most successful people in business and they have these elements there. So anyway, I'll do 2 more questions. Sorry. Yeah.
My name is Rashida and I'm from Ghana. I would like to know, my question is very simple. I'd like to know the 3 important lessons that you've learned as in business and in entrepreneurship.
Okay, I hope I covered a lot of what those lessons are here, but is Ghana, is that the Ashanti?
Yes.
Yeah, I took a class on Ashanti in college. It was a long time ago though, so I just want to make sure. Sorry, I would have written a shorter letter if I had more time. You know.
Yeah.
In fact, by the way, that same professor who used to make us go interview people, you know, first-person interviews, he would have us write a 10-page paper. So we'd turn in the 10-page paper, and he'd say, you know, and you'd put all this work into it, it'd be great, and he'd be like, look, I'm the National Security Officer of Latin America. I'm an incredibly important person. I don't have time to read your 10-page paper. Give me back a 3-page paper. And you're like, oh, son of a, because then you have to like take this thing and edit out all these words you're really proud of. You're like, okay, what matters? And so you're like, okay, I have to do this 3-page paper. And you turn it in, and he's like, who do you think you are? There's 20 students in this class, and I got to read 3 pages. He's like, come back with a 1-page paper. And you're like, what? Like, and then you give it back to you, and he'd say, okay, and by the way, you have 1 more week to turn it into, there's a type of writing called E-prime, where you don't use any linking verbs, so no forms of the verb to be. And he'd say, like, I'll give you an extra half-letter grade if you bring me back a paper that's 1 page long with no form of the verb to be in it. So, like, I feel like I played those games already. They made me a better writer, but I'm not. But
well,
anyway.
we actually do that with a 30-page business plan. You have to turn it into a 1-page business canvas. So we've done some of that. Yeah.
So one of the lessons I think I've learned is never to underestimate anybody. And this comes in so many different forms, right? And it doesn't mean everybody's awesome, you know, but one of those forms that you guys will find is that psychologically, when somebody speaks with a foreign accent and English isn't their first language, we underestimate them. You know, we just do, right? So somebody from China sits down, you know, in your office and starts telling you about something. It is easy to forget that they're an amazing genius with multiple degrees in computer science who's built because they have halting English. It's just a temptation. It's a biological temptation of ours. Like, if they can't find the right words, like our biology tells us, well, they must have a slow brain, right? And so that's one example linguistically, but I think it's also very easy to underestimate somebody's experience. So, you know, when I got hired by Google, I'd only worked at this company called Spidera that nobody's ever heard of. So Google, I think a lot of people at Google were tempted to hire folks from Yahoo and Microsoft and these names they knew. But those people had worked in big companies, had very specific responsibilities, didn't understand the overall company strategy. And so when they got to Google, they weren't actually really effective entrepreneurial employees because they had such particular focus, right? Like at Spidera, we were a company of 30 people powering 2% of the world's internet. We didn't have a receptionist because we were so lean. So if you were the one closest to the door, you were the receptionist that day, like in addition to doing your real job. And because we were so small that, you know, if we needed to make the quarterly sales figures, like the CEO would be like, okay, stop your job today and get on the phone and sell some stuff, right? And if we needed to change data centers, like everybody in the company would come late and move servers literally in the backs of our cars from one data center to the other, and they would teach us how to config those and get our service back online. And so what happened was I got to Google, and I was one of the most effective startup type and entrepreneurial employees, there in my peer set, because I'd worked in this company where I'd gotten exposure to all these different roles, right? It would have been very easy, and a lot of people did dismiss me because they're like, what the hell, Spadera? And yet I think like that was what made me valuable to Google. And so I have just learned to not underestimate people. I mean, we'd still do it. It's still very tempting. It still happens automatically. You still do it with bias. You do it not even realizing you do it, right? Do it around gender, you do it around race, you do it around age. It's really easy to underestimate young people, right? Even as you're relative young people, you look one generation down, it's really easy to underestimate them. And so I think that's one thing that has cost me a lot of money, probably friendships, has like cost me a lot of time, because I bet you I could have hired better people if I didn't underestimate them. So that's a piece of advice. Who else has a question? Sure, on the camera.
Okay, I'm Rudi from Congo, DRC in Central Africa. I'm happy to hear that you have invested in Ethiopia. So what's the biggest challenge you faced while investing in Ethiopia? And what lesson can we learn from that as a young African leader?
Yeah, well, so my investments in Ethiopia are all just with charity water and this nonprofit stuff, right? So, but they do feel like investments because we're moving millions and millions of dollars there. So a couple of things. And by the way, it's a tough business climate, right? So as an outsider coming in, I would feel really like I need a strong local partner to help me navigate that. Somebody who can really help me understand the risks. And so one of the reasons why Ethiopia has been an amazing place for charity water to do business is not only are there a lot of deserving people who need clean water, they're all over Africa and Asia, et cetera, but there we have this partner in Tigray called REST, the Relief Society of Tigray, that are all former soldiers from the war with Eritrea who are just badasses. Like, they know how to get stuff done. And so when we were like, look, we want to bring clean water and we can bring the resources, we have this partnership there with these people who they have incredible work ethic, they have incredible drive, they are not daunted by failure at any point. And that's why we're at the point where like we've kind of run out of places to drill wells in Tigray. It's like saturated with good access to clean water. And it's a result of having the best local partners on the ground. So there are multiple countries across Africa that could use that same kind of infusion of capital. But if we don't find a kick-ass partner on the ground, we can't do it ourselves. You can't have people from New York fly in and rent bulldozers and augers and start digging wells. You don't know the communities that need the help. You don't need how to build up the support infrastructures. One of the things that works well for charity water is like we put around each well, we nominate a committee, the water committee, and they set the rules for the local well. It's 3 men, 3 women, and then 1 woman's in charge. The women are always way more responsible. And so it's true. You've seen, there's like data around that, right? If you lend money to women, you get it back. Yeah. So that's true across cultures. So we put the women in charge. They set the rules for the well. The well isn't free because people tend to abuse things that are free, so they put a very small nominal price on it. But they know what the appropriate price should be for the community. They set the opening hours and the closing hours and stuff like that. And so, but I can't just go and find out who the woman from the village should be. Like, I need a local partner who understands that village, who understands who the elders are, and who can help us find those people, right? And so that is a barrier sometimes to investment or to nonprofit work, is do you have the best people on the ground, right? So as virtual as InVenture is, so we have very few employees for InVenture in Kenya, but the employees who are there are absolutely kick-ass. So we need them to help us deeply understand the users in that market. We need them to help us understand the mobile carrier partners that we're doing a lot of business through these M-Pesa markets now, and so we need to know those partnerships really well. We need to, ultimately InVenture can be a company that can, like I said, figure out if you need a bike and sell it to you. And so we need to understand the needs of those cultures. And it's not, Kenya and Tanzania are not exactly the same. They have different cultural sensitivities. We need to know that. And so let me give you a great example from Google. Google, as you know, was just incredibly successful in so many cultures with this very simple search page, right? So it's just like, It was just Google and the little input box in very little writing, right? And it was refreshing because most of the internet had these crazy pages and like, this is beautiful. And so we had a lot of success in the United States, Latin America, Western Europe, but we were losing in Korea. And so our nature was computer scientists like, okay, let's just try and make our search results better. So we were hiring more and more and doing better translation and like testing, like, are we giving them back the right results? And our stuff was better. Like Google has these tests they run where they run a search and then they take the results from Google and the results from Yahoo and the results from the local search engines like Dome and stuff, and they strip away all the branding and then they show those results to real human beings, like which ones are best. And that's how Google tests the quality of its search results, right? And Google's always been the best and continues to get better and better. And so we're like, wait, our search results are really good in Korea, and yet we're still losing. We're still losing traffic. Why is this? So we sent some people to Korea. So we were, by the way, this was all being developed in near San Francisco in Mountain View, and by mostly Americans, some Indians, some mainland Chinese and stuff like that, but not really many Koreans on the team developing this. And so we send some people there to do some testing, and you've seen focus groups before. You get a user in front of a computer and you're standing there with a clipboard, and you say, okay, go ahead and go to Google. So they type in google.kr and the page comes up, and so the tester says, okay, now search for flowers. And the Korean person would be sitting there like this still. And the tester would be like, okay, just go ahead, search for flowers. And they'd be like, and they're like, is there something wrong? Like, can you just type in flowers and search for flowers? We'll go through this. And the Korean would say, I'm waiting for the page to finish loading. And it was because in Korea, they had lots of really blinky websites that were very, very busy. They were very used to that. And so our website they thought was broken because it was so simple. They thought, well, shit, all the other stuff must not have loaded up. So, And then when we got deeper into that, it reflected on us poorly. They thought we weren't capable of building a more robust site with more stuff on it. And so that we must have been the dumb guy search engine. And so it was an amazing cultural insight that like we were blind to because we didn't have people there, right? And so back to your question, like, anytime I'm gonna work internationally, like I wanna make sure I feel like I have some understanding of that culture, I'm exposed to it, et cetera, but I need to have the most deeply trusted local partner there, or I think it's gonna go sideways. You can't just parachute in and fix something. You hear these horror stories. A friend of mine has a nonprofit called Architecture for Humanity, where he was an incredibly well-known and successful architect in the developed world. And what he saw were, a tsunami hit Sri Lanka, and these aid foundations would come in and build these huge concrete houses. And he's like, those are completely inappropriate for this climate, right? Like, people are going to roast in those things, like a metal roof and concrete, and this climate, like, where it's never like not 110 degrees, he's like, that's just not appropriate. And so they're just imposing Western architecture onto these climates without actually talking to local architects and understanding like what works here, which building materials are available, which work, how do you get airflow through it, how do you get light into this house, in Haiti, like a lot of the rebuilding in Haiti didn't take into account that there really isn't electrical light or electrical power available on a regular basis. And so the insides of the houses need to be lit ambiently. And so if you just put up solid building materials on the roof, nobody's going to be able to see during the day even, right? If it's all corrugated metal, nobody can see inside. And so, and yet you're not going to have that insight if you're just designing from the US or the UK. And so I think that's absolutely the key to cross-culture, kind of partnerships is, and this, by the way, this is something that when I talk about that office I shared with the Indian guy who was actually, from Botswana, there was another guy in that office who was Indian from India. And I remember I was talking about, what was I can't remember the subject, but I realized like, maybe it was like Michael Jackson or something like that. He'd never heard of Michael Jackson or been exposed to Michael Jackson at all, who I feel like the whole world had. But and then I was like, wow, you're really different. And as we started talking about like our compass and what mattered to us, each of us was on a very different page. And I was like, you know what's weird is because Indians like speak English well generally and say dude a lot, I had been lulled into the sense of thinking we were really the same person, right? That he had the same concerns and same values and same, that I did. And it just wasn't that true. Let me give you a really quick example from, if you guys don't mind me staying, a really quick, a quick example from China. Okay, so I was in this group, not unlike this. I was in this group of young leaders gathered at the Aspen Institute years ago, and it was people 25 to 40. Actually, it was supposed to be 30 to 40, but I was 25. They let me in. And it was supposed to be, the goal was moving from a life of success to a life of impact. So everybody in the room had some degree of incredible success, not necessarily financially. Some guys were building, the founder of Room to Read was there. I mean, an incredible charity that builds libraries in the developing world. There were a lot of really inspiring people in the room. But one of the guys who I won't mention was from mainland China. And as part of this program, we would read things together. So we would read like Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail, and then we would talk about it. We'd read like an inspirational poem, but we would also read articles from like the New Yorker magazine about frauds in business. So we had some incredible fraud in that bubble. Guys named Ken Lay, like you've maybe heard of Enron or WorldCom, these huge fraudulent enterprises that cost pension funds billions and millions of dollars, and people ultimately went to jail for it. But it was incredible because a lot of us knew these people who worked at these companies or could have been recruited to these companies. It was just an incredible, like ethics just went out the window and everyone was taking for themselves. And so we had a big crash. And so one of the articles we read was about this guy, about these two guys, Dennis Kozlowski, who ran WorldCom, and Ken Lay, who ran Enron, and how they had both stolen money from their companies and used it to buy huge houses in Florida, where if you own a big house in Florida, you can't lose it in bankruptcy. And so even if you go to jail and you're sued, and you get to keep your $20 million house. And so they would steal all this money, buy these massive houses, and they would throw these lavish parties. And like Dennis Kozlowski had a $15,000 shower curtain in one of his houses, and he spent $5 million on his birthday party, but $5 million of company money. And so we read all these articles, and then we each, we had closed door discussion time where we'd each talk about things that we thought like, either we had done wrong or we saw an ethical lapse that we didn't speak up and try and stop it. And so we were kind of in a trusted little environment, confessing to each other, like, this is what I got to do better. My boss, I watched this thing happen and I was afraid because I was a junior employee or something. And after we'd all spoken for a while, the moderator called on our friend from mainland China and said, "You haven't said anything. Do you have something to add?" And he said, "I'll never understand you people from the West." And I always said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "You kill all your heroes." And we're like, "Wait, did you read the same articles we did?" And he's like, we were like, "Okay, how do you think of them as heroes?" He's like, "Look at how they took care of their families. Look at everything they did to make sure their families had these huge houses and these great cars, and they got to go to great universities and everything." And we're like, "Yeah, but they stole all these money from these companies." He's like, "But their families were the most important. And they did everything they could to take advantage, to look after their families and to create these opportunities for their families." And I remember just looking at him and being like, it's so easy to judge him and say that's wrong, and yet maybe there is something beautiful about placing a family over a corporation, like he's just on a totally different scorecard than we are in our culture. And we had something similar happen when I was at Google. We had another China thing where it was revealed that a lot of code working on one of our Chinese products had been just stolen from a Chinese competitor. Like, it was just, when you open the hood, it was the same computer code. And so, this was scandalous. This isn't how Google works. So our head of engineering was like, "I got to go over there and publicly fire these guys, whoever did this. Like, we need to make an example of it and show the world this is not how we do business." So he goes over there and gets the guys in the room. He's like, "Did you steal this code?" And they're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, why did you?" Like, "Hey, you want to see how we did it? Check this out." Okay, so they showed "Hey, we hacked this, and we called there and we got the receptionist to give us a password to this other thing, and we did all this, and we were able to get this, and it worked. It's awesome, right?" And he said he was there ready to fire them, and yet as he turned around, he realized these guys really think they were doing something amazing for Google. They really think that they were like proud in advancing the mission of Google. Like they thought they were going to get a bonus for it, you know? And it was just, it was a different culture where, the loyalty was to the team, but not to some random intellectual property. And if you think about it, intellectual property is kind of it's an academic construct, right? Like the notion of copyright and stuff, copyright doesn't occur in any holy scripture, right? It's not in the Bible, it's not in the Quran, like you don't, and God said unto thee, like protect somebody's music, it's just not, it's not there. And so as a result, it's an academic construct. And those of us who grew up in these cultures are like, okay, I should respect your patent, right? And that kind of thing. Like that's not necessarily like a universal principle that organizes humanity. And so you're in this culture where intellectual property doesn't have that kind of value. Instead, there is much more of a priority on competition, on getting ahead, and so again, we were there to, he was there to fire that guy, and he's like, oh my God, I gotta. So we did a retraining to try and kind of bring people around to like how we viewed the world, but as a result, we just couldn't count on that. And so again, back to that question, I just think you can't presume these other cultures, and the only way you can be successful there, whether as an investor, building a branch of your business there, or as a nonprofit, you have to have incredibly strong local partners. And that's another way that all of you can be successful, is to be in that translation business. And I don't mean literally just translating the language. I mean translating the opportunity, translating the business culture, translating here's how to come here and get stuff done. Whether it's in Korea and learning how to pour beer for the other person across from you, or how to walk into somebody's house and be respectable, how to turn down tea but turn it down twice and accept it the third time, and some of that stuff that's just traditionally cultural, or just understand what it is, why this person is motivated, what are they afraid of, what's moving them. You're going to be advantaged of that. So I got to go. I really appreciate this time. It's been amazing. I really hope Reno isn't all of the United States. It's a special place, but I hope you guys do get a chance to travel a little bit more. I did hear you got to go on some pretty cool field trips around here and stuff like that. So I'm really glad that you've had those experiences. How much longer are you here?
2 more weeks.
2 more weeks. And then to DC? Yes. Cool. I think DC is really special. I think it's a great place to see. How long are you there for?
DC?
Yeah.
5 days.
Oh, that's good. That's a good time. It's super hot and humid, by the way.
Oh, really?
So some of your countries are, some of them aren't. But I'm really glad you're getting that kind of opportunity. Yeah. I'm just really proud that our country has started an initiative like this, and I think you should all feel incredibly proud that you were able to distinguish yourselves to participate in it. So let me know over Twitter how things go for each of you, and stay in touch. That's the cool thing about Twitter, is I'm one reply message away. So, but I'm really glad this has been time well spent for me. Yeah. So thank you guys.
Awesome.
I gotta take my money. By the way, this is totally awesome. You got me this?
Wait.
Thank you.